Started as I usually do. If you have a cell phone, please either turn it off or silence it. So I will call to order the regular City Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 1st, 2017. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Ide? Here. Commissioner Shaw?
Aye. Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Commissioner Mengelberg? Here. Mayor Holliday?
Aye, here. So please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so I've got a couple of proclamations, but before that, Channel 12 did a news piece on the Oregon City Police Department here a week or two ago, and I wanted to play that for you. We need to have it real quiet because for some reason we can't get the audio to work, so I'm gonna hold the mic to my machine. Go ahead and start it. Now I've got no sound.
I've got it.
Oh, because I'm not on.
The aftermath of a car crash can tear families apart. It's a sight Oregon City police officers say they're seeing now all too often.
It was surprising, and the bosses here were kind of trying to analyze what the problems were and why we were having so many crashes.
After looking at the numbers, the OCPD says it determined officers are responding to 3 times as many crashes than any other city in Clackamas County. In 2016, the traffic team answered more than 3,000 calls for service and responded to 199 crashes.
We have 3 major highways that come through the city, and so we have a lot of folks coming and going every day. Probably 2/3 or the majority of the crashes that we're seeing are rear-end crashes, which suggests to us that people are following too close or going too fast in the particular areas.
In response, the OCPD's newly beefed up traffic team is now on the road around the clock to protect drivers. Before, patrol officers did traffic enforcement in between other calls and writing reports. But this 3-officer traffic team is specifically looking for violators and hoping to have a bigger impact.
It's good to work as a team because you kind of have a common focus.
The team is now setting up in trouble spots across the city, looking to identify the problem and prevent others from getting hurt. Places like where I-205 cuts through the city, along with 99E, 213, and that stretch of Highway 43, which carries traffic over the Arch Bridge.
What we tried to do is focus on those intersections or before and after those intersections so that we could get people to slow down. We try to go out 2 or 3 at a time so we can make a bigger visual impact to folks that are coming through.
Traffic generators like Providence Willamette Falls Hospital and even the county jail are considered problem spots too. But lately the team says they focused on patrolling school zones.
And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of beacons or actually any beacon lights, and so all of our schools are just posted. So that makes it difficult for citizens to necessarily be aware of where they're at.
Since December, they've issued warnings and citations to drivers while teaching traffic safety classes and speaking to community groups. The department says it stepped up enforcement in 2017, led to hundreds of citations for drivers, including more than 1,200 speeding tickets. Efforts they believe that are already making a difference.
Part of the piece that we think makes it work is that a lot of the folks that we contact haven't had a prior ticket or they haven't had one in 4 years, and so we can send them to a traffic school and kind of get them up to speed. Starting with, we have a lot of crashes here, and this is why.
In Oregon City, Caitlin Bolduck, Fox 12 Oregon.
Okay. So now I have, and thanks, Captain Davis. Yes. Standing in for Chief Ban. I have 2 proclamations I'm going to read. One, I am just going to let you know that it's out there and you can go to the city website and see it there. That is the proclamation declaring November 1st, 2017 as Extra Mile Day. The first proclamation I'm going to read is to recognize and honor the service and sacrifice of the law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty while protecting the Oregon City community. Whereas law enforcement is an honorable, hardworking profession that diligently seeks to make our communities more livable and safe, And whereas there is no greater sacrifice an officer can make for their community than to give their life, and whereas the death of a police officer shocks the very soul of a community, our government and the very freedoms of the officers have sworn to protect, and whereas the impact of this tragedy upon the officer's family, friends, department, and community is immeasurable, and whereas our hearts and thoughts go out to the many killed in action while serving to protect our community, now, therefore, I, Dan Holliday, Mayor of the City of Oregon City, along with the City Commission and the citizens of Oregon City, Oregon, extend heartfelt condolences to the families of the following officers. Reserve Police Officer Robert Lidke, lost on November 3rd, 2013, and Police Officer George J. Hanlon, lost on April 23rd, 1906. These officers have been lost but will never be forgotten. This community will be forever grateful. We ask for a moment of silence as we remember Oregon City's valuable public servants and pray for the healing and hope into the future. In witness hereof, I have set my hand this first day of November 2017. Okay. The second one, in observance of Veterans Day, which will be observed on November 10th, 2017, honoring Oregon City employees and citizens who are veterans and or are currently serving in the military, reserves, or National Guard. Whereas the freedoms we enjoy as Americans have been purchased and maintained at a high price throughout our history, and whereas honorable service performed in the defense of our nation is the highest form of citizenship, and whereas 27 Oregon City employees, which is approximately 20% of the city workforce, are veterans or are current members of the armed forces, and whereas the City of Oregon City is an employer supporter of the Guard and Reserve, and whereas at the state level an estimated 310,333 Oregonians are veterans, and whereas 143 Oregon veterans have made the ultimate sacrifice while serving in the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, and whereas in conjunction with Veterans Day observed on November 10th, 2017, the City of Oregon City is proud to recognize the men and women who have served to protect our freedom, and whereas our hearts and thoughts go out to the many killed in action or disabled while serving their country, now therefore I, Daniel Holliday, Mayor of the City of Oregon City, do call upon all employees and citizens to observe Veterans Day with appropriate ceremonies in honor of those who have served to preserve the principles of justice, freedom, and democracy. In witness hereof, I have set my hand this first day of November 2017. Okay, that does it for the proclamations. Is the letter on the?
There's one more proclamation, Mayor.
I know, but I'm not going to read it. I said that we would. People can go see it. There it is. How do I get there? So there's an interesting story behind this next little thing. My mom is probably in her mid-80s now. She goes to Sherry's every day for lunch in West Lynn, and she has a regular waitress, and this waitress knew that I was the mayor because Mom, of course, talks about everybody. And so this August, she brought my mom this letter. So I'm going to read this letter to you. August 12, 2017. Dear Mayor Holliday, I would like it to bring to your attention of a program that helped not only my son, but my husband and myself to get Tyler to graduate. I assume Tyler's the son. Up until junior year, Tyler's attendance was perfect and grades were B's and C's. Junior year came along as well as a bad attitude. His grades dropped dramatically as well as his attendance. He was put into this program called Attendance Court, where this wonderful judge, Lorraine McNeese, who I cannot praise enough on how much personal interest she takes in each and every child, she was stern but fair and kept the accountability for their actions. She even attends their graduations. We believe Judge McNeese should be given some kind of recognition for her work in this program and to make sure this program stays around. Thank you, Dennis and Lori Wilson. So Judge McNeese is in the audience. I want to give her a hand, say thank you. And now we're on to Metro Update. Councilor Collette.
Good evening. Do I have a
Clicker?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. As you know, this is my, I think most of you know, this will be my last update to Oregon City. I'll be retiring, not just resigning, but retiring, effective soon after the new year. So it's really a great honor and privilege to be here. It has been terrific working with all of you over the years and with your predecessors, because I think you're my third mayor that I've worked with as a Metro councilor. So I want to give you a very brief update and then wish you all well. So, of course, the first project is the one that you are most familiar with, that we are all working together on. We all know it's stalled, and we are all working carefully and I think with a good deal of care and creativity, let me say, to move forward, to negotiate with the property owner, and to come to a much better solution so that we can move this project forward. It's so critical to not just Oregon City, but really the entire state. It's not going to stall out. And just to let you know, just to go back there for a second, even though I'm leaving the Metro region and the Metro Council, I hope to stay on the board of Rediscover the Falls and continue to raise support and passion for this project and hopefully some money. So you haven't seen the end of me yet. Regional snapshots, you might remember that these are the, every now and then Metro kind of takes a snapshot of what's happening in the region at that time. This says that the most recent one is on transportation, which you have. Unfortunately, I just learned that we just came up with a new one today, and I'll make sure that you get copies of it. It's on affordable housing, and I know that that's a crisis that we all face in this region. Pretty much everyone in the country is facing a homelessness and affordable housing issue. So I'll make sure you get that. Transportation funding has been a huge issue this year and will continue to be. We have great needs in our transportation system. The legislature did a good job of passing a transportation package in 2017, but it's really just the beginning. And we know that we're going to have to do more in this region to raise more money to develop the kinds of transportation options that we really need to keep people moving. Part of that is the Regional Transportation Plan. Metro has the federal responsibility to develop the Regional Transportation Plan so that all of our major transportation projects are well coordinated. And that's the project we're in right now. We've held, I think, 3 leadership forums so far to prepare to get people all around the region's ideas, business community, elected leaders like yourselves, advocates from around the region. The next one will be early in 2018. And we'll be narrowing in the scope of that on how do we move forward as a region, building the better transportation system. This is also the year that Metro does its growth management decision, where we decide whether or not to expand the urban growth boundary, and if so, how much. We have, over the past years, changed how we do this a lot, and I'm very excited that now the way it is done is that the cities take the lead. If a city wants to expand, it really begins to demonstrate how and why it should be the place where the urban growth boundary expands. We don't just push the boundary out into farmland without real commitment from adjacent cities to make that land productive. We are also in the middle this year of our regional waste plan, and I think you've had some presentations on some of the aspects of the what are we calling it? This whole new approach to the waste system. The plan is part of that, but we're also doing a whole different take on the waste system. We'll be looking at whether we want to continue to haul our garbage 140 miles out into Eastern Oregon desert. Or if there might be better ways or closer places that we could be delivering our garbage, as well as can we be doing a better job of recycling so not as much gets shipped out there. We plan to have that new plan available next fall. I will probably not pay any attention to it because I won't have to. I remember when I, go ahead,
Let me
sorry.
ask you a quick question. So on the recycling thing, I've been reading a lot that that China is now no longer taking the recyclables and so there's really nowhere for these things to go, and companies are now asking to take the things that we all diligently recycled and put them in the landfill.
Yeah,
so
it's a huge
what is the
challenge.
solution to that?
We're looking, in fact, we met this week, we had a work session specifically on that issue because we really are facing this, we're hoping that we can get a lot more local uses, so more companies locally will be able to reuse product. There was a program in Spain a few years ago that was called Better Than New, and it was a program that repaired things, reused things, and then put them out in a market. I also read recently that there's a whole mall I think it's in Sweden, I could be wrong, but that is all just recycled products. So we're hoping to look at figuring out ways to create small businesses or much more local uses of those recyclable materials. But it is going to be a huge challenge. Without that huge China market, and we lost the wood market a few years ago when Smurfit out in Newburgh closed. So we have been landfilling a lot more than we really need to. I mean, we really need to find better uses for those products. So we're on it, but it's not going to be an easy one to solve. And right here in Oregon City Metro South, we've been talking with your staff and the community for the last year as well to try to figure out what's the best use of that property, how do we improve it. We have heard from the community that this is a really important facility. More than half of the self-haul in the region comes to Oregon City's Metro South. So we're still working on that. The plan has been to have all of these solid waste system plans, new plans in place by 2018 and 2019. So you'll be hearing more about this in the next year or so. We've given a lot of grants this year, and all of our grants feature partnerships, which I think is really kind of unique for Metro, that we don't want someone to just come in and say, I want a grant for my little neighborhood project. But your neighborhood project needs to be linked to either the city or a local church or another group, just so that we're building coalitions of people who can help solve our problems together. And this year we've given out millions of dollars in grants. Looking down here, I don't know that there was, I know Oregon City did not get one of our creative community project grants. Clackamas County did get 2 really good grants just in this last round for affordable housing. So we'll be looking at that in the future, and that should also benefit Oregon City, I think. And that's it. I made this brief because I just wanted to say again how really wonderful this community is, how terrific it has been to work with all of you over the years, not just those of you on the commission and the mayors, but all the people in the communities. This town is so engaged. People go to their neighborhood meetings. They work together. There are so many volunteers. Every year when we do the enhancement grants, I get to see just how wonderful and creative people in this community are. And it's just been a tremendous honor working with you. And I will work very hard to make sure that whoever comes after me is equally dedicated to this city, because as far as I can tell, this is where it's happening. This is really where the most opportunity, both for the region, but also for District 2. A lot of it is focused right here in Oregon City. And it's just too wonderful and too magical and too beautiful a place to not have somebody who's going to be totally passionate about accomplishing the kinds of goals that you and I have worked on together. So thank you all. And of course, if you have questions.
Questions, comments?
I would like to say thank you so much, Councilor Collette, for all that you do for the region and for Oregon City, and you'll be sorely missed. And we'll look forward to working with you for a few more months until you're off to Corvallis.
Thank
Good
you.
luck to you.
Thank you.
And I'd too like to say thank you very much. I especially know that whoever follows you has large shoes to fill, and yeah, I hope too that they're able to have the passion and the drive and the excitement and the thrill over not just the job, but Oregon City and all that we have to offer. So thank you so much for the energy that you've brought.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shaw?
You've kind of raised the bar here, so I don't know. Whoever comes up after you has got some big shoes, has got some shoes to fill here. So appreciate all you've done for us. And I do hope you come back and visit us occasionally and see what's going on here.
Oh,
so,
I will.
Okay.
Well, from the first time we sat down together, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. that I had some reservations about Metro and its beginnings.
I had heard that.
But it's been a joy working with you, and you have been a champion for Oregon City, and I wish you well in your future. And I think we have some ideas for somebody that might want to step into
I've heard that too.
Carlotta's shoes. So there'll be word upcoming about that. So
Good. There's a lot of interest, so.
thanks again, Carlotta.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Can I keep the Oregon City pen?
Good night.
That's what you
Thank
get,
you.
yeah.
All right. So, I had a request from staff, which I will grant. We are going to, for the sake of some guests in the audience, I'm going to quickly move up items 7B and 7C. So 7B is a letter of support for the sale of Oregon City View Manor and 200 Longview Way. And 7C is the resolution declaring an emergency. So let's take 7B first, Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. Chuck Robbins, the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of Clackamas County, is here to talk to you.
All right, thank you very much for having me here tonight. What we're asking is a letter of support from the City of Oregon City, allowing us to submit an application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that would allow us to sell the property that is called Oregon City View Manor. That is the 22 acres of public housing up on the top of the hill on Holcomb Boulevard. I think I've been here before, but just kind of quickly, the plan is to not get out of affordable housing in Oregon City, but we've got property that is incredibly expensive for us to maintain, and at some point, we're not going to be able to do it. So the plan is to sell between 17 and 19 acres fair market, and that the remaining 3 to 5 acres we would probably sell to a nonprofit, which would then turn around and build some affordable housing back, probably using the cottage cluster plan. So that, that ideally, though we're still trying to figure out, where the flat property is up there. So we're in the process of doing a survey. So as I said, what we're trying to do is put together an application. This is public housing. HUD has the last word on whether or not we can sell it. The plan is to use what's called the Section 18 process to sell the property. If we are successful, HUD will allow us to sell the property, and all of the units that are occupied up there will receive a Section 8 voucher. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Hyde?
I fully support what you're doing. I don't really have any concerns except, and I would certainly allow my name to be on the letter of support. I just had a couple questions for you. One of them is just the estimate or a guesstimate of a timetable for the building of the cottage homes to rehouse those folks up there.
Well, I think, hard to say.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
going to, our plan is to prepare the application and submit it to HUD the end of November. HUD can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, to give us an approval or no, or a no on that. So assume we get an approval, we're probably then another year as we relocate the residents that are up there, and then we sell the property. So, you start to add that up. I mean, we're probably not doing anything up there for a minimum of 18 months, maybe up to 24 months. After that, we'd sell the property, and then we would go through the construction, which could take another couple of years.
Okay. And I noticed in the letter that it says 3 to 5 acres potentially, and we just would like to push for the 5.
Sure.
That would be our preference, just to have some more extra space for additional cottage homes or whatever ends up being built.
Well, and that's the reason that I'm here, is we want to work with the city and find out, what works best for the city. I think the things that will dictate that is, do we have 5 acres that we can build on? Is there 5 acres that we can pull out that doesn't negatively impact the remaining acreage that needs to be sold. And we're thinking of the eastern edge of the property as a good place for us to own. That's the closest to the school. There's the development just to the north of the property has a road that's stubbed, that's looked like it's ready to come into that property when it's developed. So that's another consideration. We want to make sure that we're not retaining property that's going to be turned into right-of-way. We want to retain property that we can build housing on.
Commissioner Shaw?
So, agreeing with Commissioner Ide here, I understand you're trying to generate revenue to build other affordable housing within the county. And the one thing I think we're looking at is to make sure we can keep as many units up there as we can. As we know, when the housing count or the homeless count came out, Oregon City has the highest number of homeless people, and a lot of that is because of not being able to afford homes. So anytime we're going to be losing affordable homes, it's kind of a awkward situation for us. So if we could take max that, if we get to that 5 acres, Chuck, that's, and then I've always thought, and I know it's kind of out of the question probably, but to replace what's being taken. So you're going to be taking out, there's 100 units up there now, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so obviously we'd like to have 100 units back there, but more densely together and stuff, and still be able to have property for you to generate your revenue from. So I'd like to see, I think there was something like, you said 30 units maybe left or something, but if that higher that number, the more comfortable I'm going to be with it. But I do support the letter too, so.
Well, and I should say that, this is just the first step, in the redevelopment and kind of the repositioning of public housing in Clackamas County. We also have Clackamas Heights, which is located, farther down by I-205 on Holcomb, and the plan there is to actually redevelop that entire site. And so, so units that if we lose 100 units up at OCVM, Oregon City View Manor, and build back, 30, we've lost 70. I anticipate that we will gain that 70 back down at Clackamas Heights. And, of course, when we start to work on that, we're going to want to work very closely with the city, for the neighborhood plan on that.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so does anybody have any objection to the letter? All right, then we'll sign that and get it back to you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chuck. Good seeing you.
So next is Resolution 1726, declaring an emergency and exempting Clackamas County Modular Tiny Home Assembly from planning code requirements and processes on a temporary basis until February 28th, 2018. Ms. Turway.
Thank you. Again, Chuck Robbins, Executive Director for the Housing Authority of Clackamas County.
Thank you again. So yes, we appreciate consideration of this. The Tiny Homes project for veterans is maybe the highest priority that the Board of County Commissioners is undertaking right now. We have completed 10 of the pods, and the plan was to complete 15 pods up there and then move them to our property located off of Jennifer and 115th. That is still the plan. This would allow us to, continue that operation up on the property at Red Soils, with the plan to be out of there, before the end of February. So happy to answer any questions that you have on this.
I'll do there. Better do this.
Commissioner Shaw.
So, how's it going on the Jennifer site, Chuck? I mean, are we?
So it's actually, a little ahead of schedule. The weather has been very kind to us. The last I heard is the water and sewer lines had been put in. I anticipate that the paving has been done. So the site work is well underway. We're still having to go through, zoning development ordinance, LUBA, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that, that is scheduled for November 30th. So, we've made contact with a commercial modular company, so we can get some modular units up there, and we just received, a bid today, so we're well on our way to getting it done. And I should say that, those 10 units, once we got the volunteers up there, which I understand, a number of you, we're swinging some hammers, which we really appreciate, took us 3 weeks to get those built. So I anticipate that, we'll be oversubscribed in volunteers again, and we'll get those 5 built very, very quickly.
Good, thank you.
Anybody else? Is there a motion?
Let's see, move to approve 17-582, resolution number 17-26.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I just want to say one thing to the folks out in the viewing audience. The reason we're declaring an emergency is because the county did fall a little bit behind schedule as far as the buildings were concerned, and our original ordinance expired on the 31st of October. So this is just giving them an extra 90 days to get the rest of the construction done and get those things moved out of the way. With that, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Ide,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Well, with the mayor's explanation of the emergency clause and why it was used, I'll vote aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, Mr. Krupp.
Thank you.
He was there to grade me.
All right, now we're back on the agenda. We're at citizen comments. Citizens are allowed up to 3 minutes to present information relevant to the city but not listed as an item on the agenda. Do we have anybody that's not for the next item?
There were none submitted.
Okay, so we are done with the public comment. Is everybody okay with the agenda? All right, then we are on to PC 17-127, AP 17-05, appeal of Planning Commission's denial of TP 17-03 and ZC 17-02 zone change from R10 Single Family Dwelling District to R8 Single Family Dwelling District and a subdivision of 77 lots, Wheeler Farm, located near White Lane and Orchard Grove Drive. Ms. Turway.
City Attorney Phil Weisman.
Mr. Weisman, somebody.
Christina's sitting here.
I apologize. Just the preliminary matters of the land use hearing script. Public hearing on land use matter is scheduled tonight. Staff report was prepared and made available to the public 7 days in advance of tonight's hearing that identified the criteria that are at issue in this appeal. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure the commission will follow is set out in state law and Oregon City Municipal Code. Hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart behind Laura. The Planning Commission has recommended denial of these applications, and the Planning Commission has decided to deny the applications, and it was appealed. The matter is now before the City Commission for final consideration. City Commission's review of this type of matter is on the record, so an argument is allowed, but no new evidence. It's also limited to the issues raised in the notice of appeal. So if an issue wasn't raised in the notice that brought this before the City Commission, it's not an issue that can be discussed tonight. Anyone who wishes to speak in this matter should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the city recorder. Speakers will proceed in the order in which the card is received. And because this is an appeal, the speakers are limited to those who participated before the Planning Commission, and they're the only ones who are allowed to appeal. For the public record, please begin your testimony by stating your name and whether you reside or have a business within the city. Argument should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. Person may submit any written material while this record is open, so long as it doesn't contain new evidence. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If the City Commission makes a decision with which you agree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the Commission's consideration without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements that the city and all parties can respond to. The issue will not be adjudged appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, ORS 197796 requires to note that the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the Commission To respond to the issue will include an action for damages in circuit court. Does any commission have any ex parte contacts, conflict of interest, bias, or any other statements to declare?
No.
Any
I do not.
No.
Any challenge from the audience? Seeing none. Have any commissioners visited the site?
Yes.
Okay. Any challenges based on that? With that, now turn over to Christina for the staff report.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kabizman. I'll be going through kind of the background of the subdivision zone change application, the Planning Commission's decision and their findings, the appellant's appeal criteria, as well as public comments. And then I'll finish up with kind of options for the City Commission tonight, and then I'll hand it back a little bit to Mr. Kabizman to talk about some policy implications. So this is an appeal AP 1702 of a proposed 77 lot zone change and subdivision, often called Wheeler subdivision. But before I move forward to that, I'd like to add 2 exhibits into the record tonight. One is a letter from Don Wheeler, which is Ms. Reed has already added to your packet, and that's exhibit number 1. Exhibit number 2 is a letter from the applicant, which is extending the 120-day period to December 8th, contingent on Oregon City making a tentative decision at tonight's meeting and not leaving the record open. So that is also entered into the record as exhibit number 2, and Ms. Reed has hard copies of that letter if you want to look at it. So once again, this is a appeal of the Planning Commission's denial of a 77-lot subdivision with a zone change from R10 to R8. The subject site is identified in orange. This is the nearby zoning. You'll see the property, there we go, is currently zoned R10. There's parcels around it that are R8, as well as other parcels that are R10. This is a conceptual layout of the subdivision. It involves a 1.35 acre open space of Tract A. Tract B is a integrated on-site stormwater management system. There is a approximately 1.3 acre remainder property, which will be not part of the subdivision, will be part of the neighboring property next door.
And where is that?
It's right here. This is the remainder lot, which will be added to the parcel. You can see the property line right here of the neighboring property. You'll notice that there are power line easements along the bottom half of the subdivision. Those are on each of the platted lots, and you cannot build in structures on those easements, but you can have landscaping in other parts of your yard, as well as the detention pond. Let's see. Here's another layout showing the proposed subdivision here, as well as some existing subdivision. And then as part of our subdivision application, we require a connectivity analysis. So these are some other parcels that have not gone through development. And here's the conceptual block layout. So at the Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission determined under our Municipal Code 17.68 under zone change that the proposed application did not meet criterion A, which is that is not consistent with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, and I'll speak more in detail on that. Public, most of the comments we heard from the public either kind of fell into 2 categories. One, lot sizes and neighborhood compatibility. Many of the public comments indicated that community livability is compromised when 65 of the 77 lots do not meet the 8,000 square foot standard by ability of our lot averaging under our subdivision code, making this a de facto R6 subdivision. They noted that nothing in the comprehensive plan required higher densities. The proposal will not increase the supply of affordable housing. The neighbors believe the plan policy requires lot sizes that are compatible or cohesive with adjoining neighbors. Under transportation, schools, and sewer adequacy, they indicated that the intersection of Central Point Avenue is at capacity and cannot accommodate any additional traffic, and that schools are overcrowded and cannot accommodate additional students. The Planning Commission, as part of their deliberation, found the following. And I also kind of grouped it under these 2 categories. Under lot size and neighborhood compatibility, they found that the proposed zone change would result in a lot layout that was not cohesive and compatible with the existing surrounding developments, particularly the Hazel Creek Farm development to the west. Under facilities, that the existing level of traffic congestion within the city, most notably the intersection of Warner Milne, Warner Perry and Leland, was unacceptable, and any additional density, no matter how modest, would contribute to this concern. They found a lack of capacity within the school system and a concern regarding a sewer pump station to accommodate the additional development. And with those findings, they voted to deny the zone change, which therefore made the subdivision criteria unable to meet because the subdivision was an R8 design. So the applicant submitted an appeal, and under the appellant's grounds, I've again kind of grouped them into the two categories. They believe the Planning Commission misconstrued the evidence presented, but specifically, the Planning Commission incorrectly interpreted and applied Comprehensive Plan Goal 2.4 relating to neighborhood livability and failed to balance these policies against other applicable plan policies. Erred by relying on Municipal Code 1768-020 and the lot averaging standard. So 68020 was that section that I read to you about the comprehensive plan policy to deny the zoning map amendment. Under transportation, schools, and sewer adequacy, that the Planning Commission incorrectly interpreted and applied Comprehensive Plan Goal 11.1 regarding public facilities. They failed to give proper effect to the zone change criteria and incorrectly considered school capacity under ORS 195-110 and misconstrued the evidence regarding the same. And finally, erred that by finding sanitary sewer inadequate based on a lack of pump station details. So in your packet, planning staff put together a memo where we tried to identify Planning Commission findings, public comments, the appellate's concerns, and provide kind of findings within that. And so kind of a highlight of that, under the analysis of neighborhood compatibility, the planning staff found that the sewer and transportation facilities can be found adequate as conditioned if you, by looking through our zone change criteria for and analyzing facilities. That ORS 195-110 limits local government's ability to deny an application for residential development based on a lack of school capacity. The Oregon City School District did not raise concerns about school capacity as part of this application. And then there's some additional policy implications that I'm going to send over to Attorney Kvaisman to speak a little bit more in detail.
Thank you, Christina. And there are two sort of policy-related issues that come up with this. First has to do with public facilities, that you have a comprehensive plan, it's implemented through code provisions. Your comprehensive plan has goal 11 that requires planning provision of adequate public facilities. And your code has one of the zone change criteria, the land use authorizes a proposal or consistent with the existing or planned function, capacity, and level of service of the transportation system serving the zoning district, and services shall be sufficient to support the range of uses and development allowed by the zone. Staff has interpreted that to say if you meet the code criteria, then you also meet the comprehensive plan provision. And this, the Planning Commission's decision, I think, acknowledged that the transportation analysis, the public works all said there is sufficient capacity to handle all this, but the Planning Commission thought that the additional lots allowed by the zone change would put too much of a burden on them. And so it becomes a matter of some daylight between what the comprehensive plan requires and the code requires. And if in fact there's going to be some daylight, how there's not, staff has some issues with how do we figure out how much daylight there is, or does the code provisions fully implement the requirement for adequate public facilities? And that's one of the policy implications that was raised by this appeal. The second issue has to do with the density issues. The Planning Commission relied on neighborhood livability to find that R8 adjacent, R8 with the 20% lot reduction based on lot averaging wasn't consistent with the R10. There are other comprehensive plan goals that encourage a variety of housing opportunities as well as increased density. And with, the planning commissions and the city commission's job is to balance those various items. And what the staff recommendation was based on the idea that the comprehensive plan says for low-density residential, either R8 or R10 is consistent. And if so, and given that they're both consistent with the low-density residential rating, if in fact you can't, if the city were to find that they were incompatible, it sort of raises a question: what kind of zone changes would be allowed? Are there?
Isn't it R10, R8, and R6?
Correct. That is correct. Sorry. Focusing on the R10 and R8. And so, it may be that may be a policy discussion you want to take up in greater detail at some later time. But the question really is, as a policy, how do we balance the need for neighborhood livability with the need for a variety of housing opportunities and increased density?
Moving on.
Moving on. So, kind of the task tonight, as you hear from the appellant, comments from the neighbors, ask staff questions, you really have two options tonight. One, if the City Commission agrees with the Planning Commission's findings and decision, staff recommends that the City Commission deny the appeal and provide staff any additional findings as needed to supplement the record in final order. If the City Commission determines that the Planning Commission erred in its deliberations and findings, staff recommends that the City Commission grant the appeal, reverse the Planning Commission's decision, and approve both the zoning map amendment and subdivision applications with the conditions of approval recommended by the Planning Department. So tonight, we just need a tentative decision. If the City Commission determines that they want to grant the appeal and reverse the Planning Commission's denial, we can come back at the first December meeting with an ordinance as well as the planning conditions of approval. So the City Commission can adopt their findings of the tentative decision at the first December meeting.
Okay.
So
Is that it?
that is my staff presentation. I'm available for staff to answer any questions before we move on to the appellant's presentation.
So the comprehensive plan, what is the comprehensive plan for this location?
Well, the comprehensive plan is low-density residential, which allows, there's 3 zones in low-density residential, R6, R8, and R10. I think the crux of this kind of policy question is planning staff has, as a policy, indicated that if facilities can be met or conditionally met, then because they are in the same comprehensive plan designation, the zones are inherently compatible. So if the City Commission determines that that is not necessarily the case, what are some of the policy directions to give back to city staff when the next zone change application comes in? Because that has been the policy direction we've been given previously. So when an applicant comes in and wants to have a zone change within a comprehensive plan designation and change from one zone to another, and they can meet the development criteria for facilities or conditionally, then we as planning staff have recommended approval for that zone change. So if that is not the case, in the sense that what Mr. Kreisman was speaking to is planning staff is under the policy direction is if a development meets our development code, it de facto meets the comprehensive plan policies. And there are a lot of comprehensive plan policies related to housing. On one end you have this conceptual understanding of livability and compatibility, but you also have diversity of housing size as well as using increased density to have more efficient infrastructure. So there's a lot of different plan policies, and so as you look for this package, how are you balancing all of those? And I think on our end, we really are looking to you as direction is if you are moving between a zone designation within its own comprehensive plan grouping, and you can meet the development standards, are you de facto, does that mean you are meeting the comprehensive plan policies? And so that's kind of one of the directions we'll be looking to you for.
Thank you.
And if not, what direction would you give us when the next person comes in?
I'm taken by the lack of participation by the school board in providing any input whatsoever. is that construed as being tacit approval?
The school, West Rogers was consulted during the pre-application. They did not turn in a formal letter. They sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But the way the ORS works, and I will go back to Mr. Kabaisman about, we have a very specific criteria regarding school capacity based on state statute.
Yeah, the state statute says a city or county may deny an application for residential development based on a lack of school capacity if the issue is raised by the school district, the lack of school capacity is based on a school facility plan formally adopted, and the city or county has considered options to address school capacity. So if the school district doesn't raise the issue, it's really off the table for the city to consider.
I just find it interesting that they don't raise the issue, they don't show up, and yet at the same time, they'll be seeking a bond to increase capacity.
Well, they did show up. I mean, West came to the pre-app, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they never take the disregard.
Well, and to answer Commissioner O'Donnell's point, when I was on the school board, we had discussions about this, and basically the district's policy was that they'd support any new building because that brings them more kids, and more kids brings them more dollars.
Yep. Understood.
Anybody else? Commissioner Shaw.
This is the application for 77 units, right? And 65 of those aren't 10,000, 8,000
Yeah, so this, no, so this is actually really specific, is lot averaging is allowed as a by right use in our subdivision code. So if they were an R10 subdivision, we do not have a cap on that. So the key thing is lot averaging is a permitted use, was not part of the Planning Commission's denial. So that, I mean, the conversation of that, if that code should be revised at a different time, that's fine. But as part of this application, lot averaging is an allowed opportunity no matter what the zone, and there is no cap on the number of lots that could be below that average, as long as all the lots, on average, equal the zoning district.
So if the commission decided to uphold the planning commission, this subdivision still could be built.
Right now, the applicant would have to come back and resubmit for a new R10 subdivision.
Right. And they could use
Lot averaging for 20% of R10.
Is there not one other path going forward for the applicant? Could not the applicant appeal the denial by the City Commission to LUBA?
Oh, correct. I'm sorry, but I'm saying if they wanted to, they chose not to do that path, they could come back and resubmit a new application with an R10 subdivision.
So we're looking at an extra 11
If you go to your
homes, is that correct? Is what the difference is?
Yeah, and I think the key thing is there's the rezoning could allow up to, but in this situation, because the applicant has a voluntary open space, I mean, there's in effect, because they could have a couple more lots, but they aren't. The difference between an R10 and what they propose is about 3 to 4 lots different. But if you took what an R8 subdivision could do, so in the rezoning, we look at the worst case scenario and how we do an analysis, which is, so we look at that as well as what they actually applied for today, which is a little bit less than the maximum because of the voluntary open space. So the difference between what the proposed is about 3 to 4 and what they could do is kind of more to that 7. That makes sense?
Yeah. Right.
Did I understand you correctly to say that low-density residential can be either R6, R8, or R10?
Correct. Those are all 3 zones. Medium-density residential is our next comprehensive plan section, and that's R3.5 and R5. And then high-density residential is R2, and that's kind of our multifamily zone.
Anybody else? Commissioner O'Donnell?
So in the application of any law, the parties involved tend to construe it or interpret it in a position that's favorable to them. I was trying to understand, it talks about the total site area devoted to dwelling units. Yet power lines and building under them cannot be devoted to dwelling units, yet they're still included within the calculation for total square footage.
Correct. As part of our subdivision, you can look at the area under a power line inside your tax lot because that is still land you can use. It's part of your backyard or side yard. You just can't build on it, but the applicant is allowed to use that in their lot average calculation.
So one interpretation would be you can't build a dwelling under it, and your interpretation is it can be part of a lot, but you can't build a dwelling.
You can utilize it as part of your lot, and therefore it could count as part of your lot area. And that's the applicant is allowed to do that as part of the kind of the by right subdivision process.
Which I'm guessing that's why in that one, I don't know, on the map. Do we have the map up?
Oh, sure.
So Tract B and Lot 55 and 56 are rather much larger. 55 and 56 are rather much larger than the other ones because a good portion of their lots are underneath the easement.
Yeah. But there is enough space to have a traditional single-family home fit in there. It looks odd, but there are pages in the application which show the setback layouts and how a standard single-family home can fit in both 56 and 55.
Okay.
Procedural question.
Go ahead.
Is there going to be additional public testimony before?
Yeah, well, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to open the public hearing. Then we'll hear from the applicant. Then we'll hear from individuals, the representatives, neighborhood groups, and so forth.
And then commissioners can give their final take on the matter.
Then the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut, and then I will close the public hearing. We'll debate.
Question to staff.
Sure.
I guess it was in the applicant's information, they were talking about adjacency and that there was some concern that lots across the street from this proposed subdivision might be different sizes. Can you point out the areas?
Yeah, I mean, at the Planning Commission meeting, there was definitely concern in this area about the existing kind of R10 subdivision and this. So I think when you hear from the public, a lot of the comments relate to this area. I don't know too much here, but I know this block was definitely part of the Planning Commission's deliberation. Are we like having a...
It's fine.
And I'm going to introduce this now, although it may be premature. When one interprets a law, as we're often being asked to do, as you are, even going back to the Constitution of the United States, you go back to the Federalist Papers to decide what their thoughts were. I look at this, and effectively, it starts as an R10, gets bumped to an R8, but the effect of applying this as without any interpretation, without any intent behind it, is to allow an unlimited number of 6,400 square foot lots. My question to anybody that would have been present when this was adopted is, was this the intent of the law, or was the intent to work with developers that when they ran into these specific lots that they could not meet the minimum, that we made some accommodation to that?
I'm not sure anybody was here at the time except for maybe Mr. Conkle. Were you here when this piece of the code was written?
We all were.
Oh, okay.
I believe I was on the Planning Commission when we were updating the comprehensive plan, and there was a lot of discussion about having a variety of lot sizes and being able to accommodate different types of housing options for people and affordable housing and all that.
So which one of you three wants to answer Commissioner O'Donnell's question?
I think the intent was to allow flexibility.
To the point where the terminology R8 is just a term only, and the lot is actually, the development is actually R6?
Well, the comprehensive plan allows for R6 to R10, and so they're providing a variety of sizes.
I'm asking what the intent was during discussions when this was adopted. If anybody can shed light on that. Last week, we allowed Commissioner Shaw to shed light on the intent of something that was very helpful. I'm asking the same thing tonight.
Commissioner, or Mr. Conkle, please.
Yeah, so I don't know that I could specifically speak to the intent, because we didn't have a discussion about what do you do in a situation where you have a utility line easement going through a property. The intent was that allowing different sized lots in a subdivision was something that appeared to be acceptable to allow a diversity of housing types within a subdivision. And then also, when you would run into situations where, you know, we used to have very strict widths, depths of lots, and this was to provide some flexibility because, you know, as we see, there's more infill lots that are left in the city to develop on. And to just sit there and say, okay, the only thing you can have is 80 by 100 or 100 by 100, it created situations where you'd have applicants coming in requesting variances for, you know, slight modifications to lot sizes, lot width. So this was to provide some flexibility, realizing that it's not all just greenfield vacant and you can just plop down 80 by 100 or 100 by 100 lots on perfect blocks. So there were a combination of thought process going into that, complying with the comp plan for a variety of housing types, flexibility, because it's still driven by the number of units. If you can have 10 units, it's 10 units. Even if 9 of them are small and one's big, it still adds up to 10 units total. So that was some of the, as I recall, some of the intent in the discussion back when those changes were made.
This just strikes me as an unforeseen consequence, that the way this is written, you could have one large lot and then average that out over every other lot in the division.
And that's why the 20% reduction was put in there, so that it did put a limit on the size. It was determined that 20% seemed reasonable for a lot reduction in a zone. So you take 10,000 and could reduce that 20%, or 8,000, reduce that 20%, as long as you average that out over the entirety. Because once again, the thought process was, it's still the same number of lots.
It just strikes me, we start out as 10, it goes to 8, and then effectively it becomes 6. And I just feel that I would struggle to think that was the intent at the time. And I apply a second principle of law, which is the reasonable man theory. And what would a reasonable man think in reading this? So I'll leave that as a matter of the record and stand down, and we'll go from there.
Now, let me be clear, this is not an issue that's on part of the appeal, right? Okay. So, any further questions of staff? Okay, then I'm going to open the public hearing. We'll hear from the applicant.
Mr. Mayor, before we start, I'm going to hand out copies of the slides that were before the Planning Commission on October 9th. These are in the record, and they'll be before you tonight, but I brought paper copies, so you have them as well. So I'm going to hand them
to Ms. Reed, the city
report. Ms. Reed disappeared, but there she is.
So before we let the applicant get started, I do want to make one disclaimer, and that is that I almost never attend Planning Commission meetings, and I rarely watch Planning Commission meetings, but I did watch both of these Planning Commission meetings in their entirety. I'm not sure what the other folks did, but I wanted everyone to know that I did do that.
Well, that being said, I watched the second meeting in its entirety.
And that's not an issue that's part of the record, and so you're certainly welcome to, and frankly probably encouraged to do that when you can.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Holliday, members of the commission. My name is Michael Robinson. I'm a land use attorney. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, the appellant, and the property owners. With me at the table is Mr. Don Wheeler. He's part of the Wheeler family that's owned this property for 3 generations since 1963. Everything we tell you tonight will be in the record because, as Mr. Gebiseman just told you, you're limited to evidence placed into the record at the time the Planning Commission was held. So while there might be things we'd like to tell you, we're going to limit it to what's in the record, which is what your code requires and what we all have to live with. We also have 3 other people here tonight, and our job is to answer your questions. I want to make sure you know who they are. Monty Hurley and Chris Goodell are both with AKS. Monty is the project civil engineer. Chris is the project planner. Todd Mobley with Lancaster Engineering is here. Todd did the traffic impact analysis that your traffic engineer, John Repliker, looked at. So here's how we're going to use our 15 minutes or so. I'm going to turn this over to Don in just a minute. He has a statement to make on behalf of the owners and the applicant. And I'm going to come back and talk about the appeal and why the City Commission must reverse the Planning Commission. But I want to note three things real quickly. First of all, there may, I've sort of gathered from your conversation, there might be, and I'm sure we'll hear this from some of the folks who are going to follow us tonight, maybe there's some things you might want to change in your code. I think those are all good things to think about, but the criteria in effect are those that were in effect, the applicable criteria, those in effect when the applicant submitted the application. So you take the law as you find it in this case. Secondly, I just want to emphasize, we're proposing, and if you approve the zoning map amendment and subdivision, we will construct only 4 more lots than allowed in the R10 zone. This is not a case where you're getting a lot more lots. Yes, there's a disagreement about their size, but it's only 4 more lots. And that's why, we'll tell you this in a minute, the school district looked at this, Mr. Rapplinger looked at this. There was no issue because we're talking about 4 lots. So enough from me for now. Let me turn it over to Mr. Wheeler, and then I'll come back and complete the appellant's presentation.
Thank you. My name's Don Wheeler. I live at 19898 South White Lane. I'm one of the sellers of the Wheeler Tree Farm property. My parents purchased this land in 1963, which is 54 years ago. When we arrived, there were only 4 homes adjoining this subject property. Right now, there are 260 homes. Our family did not resist any of these developments or zone changes because we fully understand the purpose and value of the Portland Metro urban growth boundary. The greater Portland area is obviously a very desirable place to live, and our father came to realize that the highest and best use of this land is for housing, not farming. It is a desire of my sister and 2 brothers to fulfill our father's wish to provide homes for 77 families. The decision by the Wheeler family to partition off the open space, which has 5 old-growth Doug fir trees on it, in this plan demonstrates that we want to continue to provide a benefit to our community. We strongly believe that people should be able to enjoy an open space in their own neighborhood. As this City Commission is aware, very few landowners have donated an open space, and therefore I think this is quite unique. The park will provide a place for recreation and be a reminder of the history and previous use of this land as a U-cut Christmas tree farm. The Wheeler family is fully in support of the R8 zone designation as supported by the existing Oregon City Municipal Code. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. So let me say one other thing I should have said as a preliminary matter. Please ask us questions either now or in rebuttal, but as I said, our job is to answer your questions, and the only way we have to do that is if you let us know what you're thinking. So the legal issue before you, and by the way, I should say, it really gives us no pleasure to appeal the Planning Commission. We respect the job they do for the public, but in this case, when you look at the evidence and the criteria, unfortunately, they got the decision wrong. And it's not something we say lightly. We think they do a good job, but here they clearly made a mistake. And the issue before you is whether the applicant met its burden of proof by showing that the approval criteria are satisfied by substantial evidence. As we'll explain, and as we said in our October 18th appeal, the answer is yes. So let me walk through a couple of things. First of all, what's proposed? Well, you've heard from staff. Right now, the property is zoned R10. The applicant wants it to be zoned R8. Both zones implement the comprehensive plan low-density residential designation. So there's no issue with that. I want to point out slide 7 that's before you. That shows 5 surrounding subdivisions. 3 of them are R8. 2 of them are R10, and Ed's Orchard, in fact, is both R8 and R10. So really, the only places that we're talking about any potential incompatibility, assuming that you believe that's a basis for the decision, is where we abut Hazel Creek and maybe if there's an R10 portion of Ed's Orchard. But my understanding from watching the Planning Commission hearing is it's principally the relationship to Hazel Creek. So I thought it was important to point that out. And here's another way of showing this, and I'll point out later. One of the policies calls for connectivity, and you can see this site does that. Secondly, as you've already heard, this is a 77-lot subdivision, just 4 more lots than the R10 zone, and 11 fewer lots than allowed by maximum in the R8 zone. And yes, you've already talked about the lot averaging code. Let me just read you that that section. This is Oregon City Municipal Code 16-12050, calculations of lot areas. A subdivision in the R10, R8, R6, R5, or R35 dwelling district may include lots that are up to 20% less than the required minimum lot area of the applicable zoning designation, provided the entire subdivision on average meets the minimum site area requirement of the underlying zone. And then it goes on to explain how you meet that calculation. So as Christina said, it's a matter of right. Right now, your code absolutely allows an applicant to use lot averaging. And in fact, the evidence shows all of the lots except Hazel Creek use that. And that's why, if you go back to that slide, you'll see that most of the lots are much more similar to the lot sizes being proposed in this subdivision than not. So
Confused, I thought the lot thing wasn't part of the.
The Planning Commission used that lot averaging to deny the zoning map amendment, and we raised it in our appeal.
Okay, thank you.
One final fact that I think is relevant. There's 310 lots in this area if you include the 77 in this subdivision. 99 of them are R10, but 211 are R8. So to the extent it's relevant, we're not asking to put an R8 zone. Remember, it meets the plan, it implements the plan, but we're not asking to put it where R8 isn't already found and where you don't have R8 already abutting R10. It's there. So let's talk about the approval criteria. And what I've done is talked about it in terms of the two goals, the two Oregon City Comprehensive Plan goals. I want to talk first about goal 11.1, which, as Mr. Kabisman said, is adequate public facilities and services. And the Planning Commission really found 3 areas where they thought the applicant had met its burden of proof: traffic, schools, and sanitary sewer. So traffic, you have a situation where the applicant's traffic impact analysis showed that intersections would be adequate. You had Mr. Replinger do his report for the Planning Commission, as he always does. He found at page 3 of his October 20th, or I'm sorry, what I'm going to do is read you his memo. He found the same thing at the Planning Commission, but this is his memo prepared for the City Commission hearing. This is page 3, as quote, as presented in the applicant's TIS and summarized in my comment letter, all 5 study intersections currently operate within the city's operational standards and are predicted to continue to meet these standards with or without the proposed subdivision in 2019. What he is saying is, we meet the city standards that they've told the applicant you must meet or you've got to improve intersections. And what's interesting about the Planning Commission's decision is if you read their decision at page 5, they acknowledge we meet the standard. They found, quote, the Planning Commission acknowledges that the city's existing transportation system could accommodate the proposed traffic and that the congestion of the proposed land division would comply with the acceptable levels in the Oregon City Municipal Code. So the decision itself acknowledges that we meet the standard. They were concerned, though, about the additional congestion, but not only do we meet the standard, it's additional congestion from 4 lots. So in traffic, you have both the applicant and Mr. Replinger saying we meet the standard. On school capacity, I think it primarily turns into a legal issue. You have ORS 195 before you in my appeal, and I think Bill correctly read it. If the school district didn't raise the issue, then school capacity may not be a basis for a denial. More than that, what Christina told you about is absolutely accurate. What the record shows is that the school district said it was not concerned about school capacity here because of the number of lots. 77 total, 4 extra lots over the R10 zone. For whatever reason, they did not appear and raise capacity issue. And I will tell you, while again, we appreciate the job the Planning Commission does, to speculate that the reason you have a bond is only for lack of capacity is not right. But moreover, that bond, the scope of it was not in the record before the Planning Commission. So there was no evidentiary basis for the Planning Commission to make its decision. The last issue is sanitary sewer. Unfortunately, the Planning Commission misconstrued, we believe, a comment by Ms. Marshall about pump stations. In fact, the applicant's evidence is we're going to rely on gravity sewer, and Ms. Marshall's memorandum that is before the City Commission says just that. So traffic, school capacity, sanitary sewer, the evidence shows that we met the approval criteria. The Planning Commission unfortunately either misconstrued it, did something not allowed by law, or acknowledged in the case of traffic that in fact we met the standard. The second criterion is Oregon City Comprehensive Plan Goal 2.4. They said, well, you don't meet this policy. What they failed to do is give effect to the second part, which says, quote, while implementing goals and policies of other sections of the comprehensive plan, end quote. So if staff has told you this is a balancing test, you have to look at everything. They did not do that. And if you look at our appeal at pages 6 and 7, in addition to the staff report, we list a number of plan policies that this application meets and that were not addressed by the Planning Commission. Plan Policy 2.4.2, sense of place. That's why you have a 1.35 acre open space, as Mr. Wheeler said, for remembrance, so to speak, of the history of the property. Plan Policy 2.4.3, connectivity. We've already shown you, and I'll show you again, the excellent connectivity from this site. Plan Policy 2.4.5, development of parks. There's a voluntary 1.35 acre open space. Plan Goal 10.1, diverse housing opportunities through variety of housing types and lot sizes. That's what your lot size averaging standard, which is mandatory, requires. Plan Policy 10.1.3, variety of density and type of housing. And finally, Plan Policy 10.4, diversity in housing types and affordable housing. The policy urged on you, either intentionally or unintentionally, by the Planning Commission is it's all got to be the same. If you've got R10 next to us, you got to have R10 to be compatible. There's two problems with that. One is that's not the way this area or the city is developed now. We recognize, as your plan does, that a diversity of housing types and lots adds to the richness of Oregon City. Secondly, remember, these are the same things, single-family homes on single-family lots. Had the Planning Commission explained why lack of cohesiveness and compatibility would result, this might be an easier decision to defend, but they just used those words with no explanation and, more importantly, no evidence behind them. And lastly, I think this is a policy, if you affirm the Planning Commission's decision, I don't understand how, as a policy matter, you would implement your plan in the future, because as Christina said, you have 3 zoning districts, so you'd have to change those. And I think, frankly, it's an unworkable policy. And again, we're not trying to criticize the neighbors that took their time to testify. We understand their concerns. Certainly not criticizing the Planning Commission, but you have to follow the law. So for all of these reasons, and we hope you've read our October 18th appeal, the Planning Commission misconstrued the law and made a decision not supported by substantial evidence, whereas the applicant submitted an application that was fully supported by substantial evidence and should be approved. So we would ask you to reverse the Planning Commission and grant the appeal, which would approve both the zoning map amendment and the subdivision. 2 final things. If you have conditions of approval you'd like to suggest, we'll consider them. Give us a chance. If there's something on your mind, we're certainly happy to talk about it. And secondly, and I say this, I'm not trying to be offensive, it's not how many people support or like this application or don't like it. It's whether we've met the law, and that's what this proceeding is all about. So we hope at the end of testimony tonight, you'll agree with us that the appeal should be granted and the applications be approved. And that's all we have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Questions?
I'll disagree with part of that presentation, only in that I watched the Planning Commission, and I did see a discussion on the school capacity. I don't know if that was part of the formal record or part of deliberation by the Planning Commission afterward.
May I, Mayor Holliday, may I answer that very quickly?
Surely.
Commissioner O'Donnell is exactly right. There was a discussion on it, but there was no evidence. If I just make 2 points, please. There was no evidence. There was no substantial evidence about lack of capacity. There was speculation that the bond issue equaled lack of capacity. The only evidence in the record is, in fact, that they didn't comment, and the applicant said because it was a number of lots. But secondly, as I said, and I apologize if this wasn't clear, I think it's almost not a matter of fact anymore on that issue. State law is very clear. If the capacity issue is not raised by the school district, that can't be a basis for denial. But you're absolutely right. It was discussed.
I have a question about
Commissioner Mayorward?
Sorry. I have a question about the open space. Is that intended to be available to the general public or just for the use of residents in the subdivision?
I'll let Mr. Goodell answer that.
For the record, my name is Chris Goodell, Goodell of AKS Engineering. Address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, Suite 100, Tualatin, Oregon 97062. The intent is to have it available for everybody.
Thank you.
So who's going to own it?
The HOA for the
Homeowners Association. Okay.
And maintain it?
That's correct.
So owned and maintained by the HOA, but open to the public.
And is there a way to ensure that in perpetuity?
There are two ways, Mr. Mayor, and maybe they're in tandem. One is to require it as a condition of approval, and the other is to require that that be included in the conditions, covenants, and restrictions, or maybe additionally as a requirement on the plat. But I think in perpetuity, probably the plat, I'm guessing, but any of those methods work.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, then you guys take a seat and
Thank you.
Move on to public comments here. So we'll start with Bob Kelly and Brenda Spidell Wheeler. Any relation to the Westland Spidells?
You betcha.
Ah, okay. Brenda, or Mr. Kelly, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'll yield.
Okay.
Okay, could I get that black and white map that was part of the first?
So start out, name and
yes,
city
I'm
of
Brenda.
residence.
Yes, I'm Brenda Spidell Wheeler, and as of last February, we live in Oregon City. As Mayor Holliday noted, I grew up in Westland, and I care so much about the livability in this area that when I got married, we bought a house in Jennings Lodge. My son went to Oregon City schools, and now we're heading toward retirement, and we chose Oregon City to live in. And livability is super, super important to us. If you look at the map, straight across from 75 on Orchard Grove Drive is our property. And you'll notice that it's like 4 square feet bigger than the one across from it. And so it's not that we object to the size of an individual one. If you look at our whole area, you see a wide variety of sizes. If you look at the majority of the little soldiers standing row by row, you'll notice that they're very small and very much the same. We love the variability. A matter of fact, because of our small lot, we frequently park along our neighbor's fence. And one of the issues I brought up, if you looked at the Planning Commission stuff, was that there just isn't going to be sufficient parking. We are a neighborhood of toys, and we are not a neighborhood of public transportation. There's no place you can walk to have a job. So we all have cars and we all have toys. There's basketball hoops, there's trailers, there's business vehicles. I had to drive around one of the county sheriffs the other day because he was loading and unloading all his 4-wheel vehicles. And so it kind of bottlenecked. So we have a lot of things in our driveways. And while the Wheelers folks said, oh yes, 2 and 3 car garages, it's not wide enough to have a 3-car garage. You'd have to have some weird house plan that doesn't meet the neighborhood at all in order to do that. So if you look where there's variety and where there's some more bigger places, it's so helpful. As far as having some HOA, so they're supposed to pay so that I can go use their park, I mean, that's kind of rude. And I just don't see that that is really a benefit because it puts a whole bunch of restrictions on my neighbors and makes me feel really uncomfortable in using it. So that to me is not helpful. We want variety. We want the development. This is an interesting place because nobody's saying we don't want it. Everybody's saying we do want it, but we want variety and we want mostly 8,000 square foot lots.
You're out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Yes, my name is Bob Kelly. I live at 19456 Orchard Grove Drive, Oregon City. I'm here representing the Hazel Creek Farms Homeowners Association. As I get to be president, because I was the first one to raise my hand at the first meeting, and I haven't got enough of them together to find somebody else to do it. The concern that the folks in our development have is the fact that, we're getting a big influx.
Let me stop you just for 1 second. So just to make sure, did you have a meeting and have a vote to authorize your testimony here as the neighborhood chair?
Well, they told me I had to go do it, but I don't know that we got everybody together. So I can speak for myself then.
Yeah, I prefer that, yes.
If that's better, then I can speak saying that the people that I've talked with and that stuff, the concern has been with the additional part of it. Personally, myself, to Commissioner O'Donnell's comment about the intent and everything, I mean, you've got basically 6 or 7 lots that allow the 6,000 and 7,000 square foot range. And to me, that's always been kind of a tough one. But we're like everybody else. We realize that everything has to go through. And development is all part of growing, and like the city, the congestion was part of it. Orchard Grove Drive, where I live, happens to have an S in it. So consequently, I get to watch everybody race through the S curves. But the entry and the exit seems to be okay and that type of stuff. But the overall problem, I think, is for our people that I've talked with, is the fact that it's not what it says it is. I mean, you've got 4 extra lots, as I believe the testimony said, between R10 and R8. The Planning Commission, I think, did a good job in analyzing the testimony that was brought before them. I realize that there's laws that must be followed and the rest of that stuff, but I think livability and intent on the part of laws, and you guys got a big problem with that one. Because as this is an example, and I'm sure it wasn't something that somebody thought of when they originally put it together. So with that, I will conclude what I have.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So moving on to, somebody got this wrong. So it's Terry Boyd and Brenda Martin.
Kind of overdressed, Jerry.
I get nervous around these things.
Really?
So do I.
So full disclosure, Terry and I are friends.
Oh, geez. There we go.
Am I up first?
You were doing so well, Terry.
I was trying. My name is Terry Boyd. I live in Oregon City, Orchard Grove Drive. Boy, oh boy, Grimm left town about a year too soon. The amount of fairy tales that we've heard in here in the last 2 months would certainly fulfill one more season of Grimm. I have to tell you, we heard the council speak about you have to follow the law. You don't have to follow the law. You have to follow the intent. I'm sure Officer Davis has to do that every day while he's out on patrol. Talk about checking boxes, and that's all the talk is about. Let me give you an analogy on something here. I would assume some of you are parents that are up here. If your child came home from school and showed you that they got an A-, and if you didn't do a deep dive into it, and you finally did, you asked them, man, you haven't done well in math, how'd you get an A-? Well, out of the 30 kids, 29 of them got A+, and they averaged the grades. I got an A-. That feels like cheating, and that's what's going on here. It's a complete bastardization of the law, whatever, the provision that all 3 of you guys came up with. And I have to tell you, it's disheartening as a resident here that none of you were able to give a clear and concise answer to Commissioner O'Donnell's question, what's the intent? You're writing a piece of pretty serious legislature that you didn't have an answer for. The box that they're checking off is nonsense. If you take in all of that stuff, the fact of the lots, the part that's not buildable, and by the way, a big majority of lot 53, 52, and 51 is, I don't know what the exact slope is, but it's a canyon. It's not even buildable. You're taking all of that stuff in. This is just nonsense math for a money grab. You guys have an opportunity to uphold the Planning Commission's suggestion, and that was to run from Skellinger Way back towards Orchard Grove, or I should say back towards Hazeldale, R10, do whatever you want after Skellinger Way. That made for a smart transition. I don't think it changed the lots more than 4, and it would more than likely be every bit as profitable, and everybody here would sign off on that. Nobody is fighting the Wheelers to build the subdivision. It feels like there's been an enormous amount of deception from the beginning to the end. You brought up the reasonable man clause. Any reasonable person would look at this and say, 84% of the lots don't make an R8 requirement? Seems unreasonable. It seems ridiculous. We're counting on you to be that parent that does the deep dive. Set an example. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martin?
Brenda Martin, live on 12141 Hazeldale Avenue. I do have a letter. I hope you guys all have copies of that that was submitted with the Planning Commission, so I'm not going to repeat everything that was in there. I hope you had the opportunity to read that. When we're talking about going from R10 to R8, and they're saying it's only a 20% reduction, it's actually, if you looked at the plot, most of the lots are going to be 6,000 square feet, which actually would be a 40% reduction. So I want you to take that into consideration when you're just doing that. Something that was brought up by the attorney was saying that you could make it a condition of the approval to approve this. Again, we're not arguing the building. I would love to have some other neighbors behind me to help me clean up that area that my husband has to mow every summer so the Wheelers don't have a fire in their Christmas tree farm, because we take care of that. But when you talk about the lots 50 through 40, those small lots, they're like 6,000 square feet, a little over 6,000 square feet. We almost can fit 2 or almost 2.5 of those lots just on my lot. I would like adjacent to me, across from me, to be at least comprehensively in the plan to be the same. So for the condition of approval, I'd like you to consider, if you're going to go ahead and move forward from the R10 to R8, to ask for a different plot map to include exactly what Terry said, from Skellinger Way back to Hazeldale Avenue, have it cohesive. Also, the same subdivision, by the way, Wes and I walked around the neighborhood and had 88 signatures, signed people that were opposing this. We don't have the 88 people here because we're speaking for them. And I believe that's also in your packets. But when the Ed Orchards was developed, they also had to come and fight with the Planning Commission saying, hey, can we have it cohesive? When I bought this was my dream home. This is our forever home. And I want it to be that way and stay that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Leah Sundquist and Alice Hayden.
Good evening. I'm Leah Sundquist. I'm actually reading on behalf of an individual who's out of town. I live in Hazel area on Orchard Grove. This is dated October 30th, 2017, and I'll give it to the recorder afterwards. It says reference AP 17-05, appeal of the Planning Commission, October 9th, 2017, denial of TP 17-03, and ZC, Zulu Charlie 17-02. Number 1, misconstrued the evidence presented. I don't understand how the Planning Commission misconstrued the evidence just because they disagreed with what was presented. 2, incorrectly interpreted and applied comprehensive plan goal 2.4 relating to neighborhood livability and failed to balance these policies against other applicable plan policies listed below. I feel the Planning Commission did interpret neighborhood livability. In fact, the applicant owner, Don Wheeler, said at the first public meeting that he was keeping a buffer around his own residence so that he would not have to be close to his neighbors, not verbatim. If that is not interpreting livability, what is? Yet there are 3 lots butting up to my backyard. The comment from the applicant was that they did not even consider making those lots 10,000 square feet. We in Hazeldale Creek Farms are not asking for a large buffer, just larger lots connecting to ours. Number 3, erred by relying on OCMC 17.60.020, the lot averaging standard, to deny the zoning map amendment. All the neighbors and Planning Commission asked for was the applicant owner to relook at the area between Hazel Creek Farms and Skellinger Way and increase those lot sizes. Number 5, incorrectly considered school capacity under ORS 195.110 and misconstrued the evidence regarding the same. I don't think the school capacity was misconstrued at all. When there are plans to build up to 77 new homes, there will be children involved and they will need schools to attend. Oregon City closed a couple of schools in our area recently, and I am sure we'll be asking for a bond for money to build new schools to accommodate the increase in children. The passing of a bond will increase our taxes. Thank you for your consideration of my comments, and my husband, Leo Marsh, and I are out of state at this time. Signed, Virginia L. Hokinen, 12121 Hazeldale Avenue, Oregon City, 97045.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hayden.
Good evening, Mayor Holliday and Commissioners. And I'm going to read because I lose track of where I'm thinking.
So before you start, name and city
Alice
residence.
Hayden, and I live on Orchard Grove Drive.
Thank you.
We all know when a parcel of land is voted into the city, it will be developed, so no one here is objecting to that development or the subdivision. This particular parcel was accepted under R10 rules, and the variance request is obviously to change it to R8. However, as we've stated, it looks like R6 when you look at it because there are 66 of them are 6,000 square foot lots. 14 years ago, when our development went in, R10 meant the minimum size lot was 10,000 square feet. And since then, we know the rule was changed, and going back to intent, I'm sure the intent was that if you're dividing up an R10 thing and you've got 19,000 square feet left over here, sure, go ahead and make 2 lots out of that. They'll be 9,500 square feet each. That's consistent with the neighborhood. I don't think that the intent was to take 3 large lots and skew the whole average off. I'm also assuming, because we didn't read the part of the law or the rule that talks about how to average, that we're talking about a numerical average, not like when you say the average house price. You're talking about the middle one, that we're talking about a numerical average here. And that's why those 3 or 4 large lots can really make a difference to what the neighborhood looks like for the rest of it. I don't see a variety in here or a diversity of housing. I see small lots. I see a problem with seniors trying to get into these lots, that people who are nearing retirement or who are retired, they're still looking for new homes. They're not necessarily looking for a small home, but they don't want stairs. So that means they don't want a 2-story house. They want a house big enough for their children or grandchildren to come visit, but they don't want to have an upstairs. So it's all got to be on one floor, and that's hard to put on smaller lots. So I know this is all meeting the numerical average, and the variance request meets some of the conditions, but I think it is still up to you as the Planning Commission, or excuse me, not as the Planning Commission, that was before, as commissioners of the city to decide whether you think it is the right way to go or not. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
West Richter and William Gifford.
I don't know if Mr. Gifford has.
Thank you.
Huh?
I'm disallowed.
Oh, okay then. So West Richter.
Hello, Mayor Holliday and everyone else. I'm also going to read mine because I'm a little bit nervous. In this part of Oregon City.
So ma'am, can I stop you? Can you give me your name and city of or residence for the record, and then pull the mic down a little bit so we can hear
You guys don't already know who I am. My name is West Richter. I live on Orchard Grove Drive, and I am the lot next to Lot 40 on the planned development.
Okay.
In this part of Oregon City, Hazel Creek Farm is one of the older developments and was built zoned R10. Our neighborhood is being joined by other neighborhoods that are zoned for smaller lots. The city wants a diversity of lot and home sizes. There hasn't been an R10 development since our neighborhood was built almost 15 years ago. We are asking that the new neighborhood be cohesive to our development and create diversity from the newer, smaller lots, and to keep the plan of an R10 neighborhood. Clackamas County Consolidated Plan calls for affordable housing. How much are these homes going to sell for in this new development? The new developments going in look like housing prices are $350,000 to $450,000. I don't think that is the standard for affordable housing. There is not bus service in this area for those that don't have cars. It isn't an area of convenience to walk to get your groceries. When you look online to look at houses, this area is listed low for walkability. This is a rural area, and much of the land has topography that is hard to develop because of nature, creeks and canyons, and changes in the elevation. I'm sure that it has been a difficult piece of property to plot. There are 6 lots that abut lots in our neighborhood. It was stated that the abutting lots in the development are of similar size. Only the lots that don't abut our neighborhood are of similar size. My lot is 12,600 square feet with extra property behind my house. The lot next to me is proposed at 7,248 square feet. That is over a 5,000 square foot difference. The continuation of lots down the street of Orchard Grove Drive from my house are 6,000 and 7,000 square foot lots. The lots on Hazeldale are all 10,000 square foot lots. Abutting them, there are lots that are 7,000 to 8,000 square feet. 2 of my neighbors will have 2 lots behind them, and 1 of my neighbors will have 3 lots behind them. This is, to me, not similar size. It is stated that the setbacks of the developments are virtually the same. Changing from 20 feet setback in the front to a 15-foot is a 25% decrease. If you look at AKS's Exhibit 5 and look at the diagram for the setbacks, the R10 doesn't show a porch on the house. So from the diagram, it looks like the setbacks are the same on the R10 and the R8 house.
Are you almost done?
What I have to say is so important.
You used up your 3 minutes, and I gave you another 30 seconds or so. But as everybody knows, I'm pretty firm about
Can I talk
testimony time and
faster?
about it being even on both sides.
Orchard Grove Drive is to become a main arterial street out of the neighborhood. The street has 2 curves in it, and it is not conducive to a lot of traffic. People will want to take Orchard Grove Drive out of the neighborhood so they can avoid the congestion at Central Point, Partlow, and McCord, joining in close by. This will potentially add more traffic to Pease Road, Leland, and Myers Road. There are not many roads to get out of this area. The traffic needs to be considered as it gets out of our neighborhood and goes down the hill.
I'm going to have to stop you, ma'am. You're out of time.
Can I give it to someone else
Yeah,
to
you
read?
can.
I'll join her, and so she can speak for me.
You yielding your time to her? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I will.
I have never done that before, and I'm not going to start now.
Well, there were
And I'm
some
run-
people that
and I'm
didn't
running the
speak for a
meeting.
full 3 minutes.
I realize that, but I try to run these meetings as fairly as I can.
Okay, then I'm going to say one last thing, that before this meeting, the City Planning Committee was told that they were not going to be able to speak this evening because the applicant requested that they not be allowed to speak.
That's not true. What is true is that state law prevents those people from testifying to something that they've already made a decision on.
Okay, well, I just want to say that I feel like I am dealing with a lot of unethical people that can turn numbers and words into whatever it is that they want at the time.
Thank you for your time, ma'am.
Thank you.
If you want to turn in something in writing, we'll take it as an exhibit.
Okay, we're going to take
do have
about
a
a
list.
7-minute break, and then we'll come back for the applicant's rebuttal. Huh? Yeah, Michael Robbins is the attorney.
She's going to pull up my presentation again, Mayor. Okay.
So Tony, did you want to say something first, or?
If we could, I'll just have Mr. Gebaisman respond to the issue raised about planning commissioners and their testimony.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, just wanted to touch base. You heard the last speaker mention that planning commissioners weren't allowed to speak. This was an issue that came up. Several planning commissioners were interested in talking. The difficulty is that the city's code has a specific requirement that only those people who participated before the planning commission are allowed to participate in front of the city commission.
So I misspoke. I said state law.
Yeah, well, and this is where state law comes in that, this exact issue hasn't come up before. The question that has come up is whether or not planning commissioners could intervene at LUBA and, similar type of thing, whether they have the authority to. And what LUBA said is participation as a decision maker alone isn't sufficient to constitute an appearance. So at state law, they've said, if you're a decision maker, that doesn't mean you appeared before the local government. That's a different thing. It's sort of, as we've talked about quasi-judicial decisions, you're in there with the judge hat on. And if you're being the judge, that doesn't get you the right to go on to the next level. And it's not exactly on point, but that's what we're relying on to say that the planning commissioner hasn't appeared before them, before itself.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Mr. Robinson?
May I wait until this slide is up, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
There you go.
Oh.
No, you were right. Oh, right.
Please stand by.
We've got musical computers tonight.
I'm sorry, let me find the slide I want. I'll use that one. Mayor Holliday, members of the commission, Mike Robinson again on behalf of the applicant. So we'll use our 5 minutes in this way. I want to summarize a few major issues, talk about what we heard from some of the witnesses, and then again ask you to grant the appeal and approve the application. So first of all, just a bit of business. Applicant will waive its final written argument. So that ends our opportunity to talk. The two criteria you're looking at, the criteria the Planning Commission found not met, were Goal 2.4, which requires balancing of other plan goals and policies, and we explain what those were, and Goal 11.1, which requires adequate public facilities and services. And I don't think there's really any doubt that the evidence in the record shows, not just from the applicant, but from the city, there's adequate traffic, there's adequate gravity sanitary sewer, and schools, either the evidence is there's no issue with capacity or it's simply not raised because of state law. So I wanted to summarize those. Secondly, folks said that this looks like an R6. In fact, it isn't. If you think about R6, you're down another couple thousand square feet, and because lot averaging implies, you go down another 20%. So I think what we're doing, I appreciate people's views. What we're doing is expressly allowed by your code. We're asking for R8, which implements the LDR district, and we're using lot averaging, and there's no dispute that that is a straightforward application of your law. I appreciate what people have to say about intent, but intent, when you have unambiguous language such as lot averaging, is not an issue. It's what the plain code requires. We heard a fair amount of testimony about the adjacent lots between Hazel Creek Farms and our side. If you look at where we abut, below Orchard Grove Drive, there's one lot to one lot, and we never said they were the same size. We just said, when you look at the number of lots, they pretty much match up. Above that, there's 5 to 5. More importantly, those 5 lots, or 4 lots, 34 through 37, are 7,900 square feet. So they're virtually 8,000. Those are not reduced under the lot averaging. And then 39, which is the lowest lot, is about 7,000 square feet. So to the extent it's R8, that's pretty darn close to what R8 allows without lot averaging. The lot averaging occurs elsewhere. So we heard some issues that were not raised in the appeal and really aren't before you, but I just want to mention one, and that's parking. We meet the city's on-street or off-street parking standards. It was not a basis, there was a finding about parking, but it was not a basis for the Planning Commission's decision. But we addressed it anyway, saying that we met the criteria that the city has in the OCMC for off-street parking. So it's not a basis for action on this application. Let me see if there's anything else. I think I would just say you didn't hear much in the way of testimony from the public about the approval criteria. No one disputed the evidence as to sanitary sewer, traffic. I know we probably don't have an agreement on schools, but even if we don't, state law is what state law is, and it simply can't be a basis for the decision. And I believe that the appeal, fairly read, demonstrates that the Planning Commission, no matter how earnest, made a decision that was wrong here. It did not follow the law, and it ignored the plain evidence before them. So for those reasons, Mr. Mayor, and again, we don't take this lightly, we ask you to reverse your Planning Commission, grant the appeals, and approve both the zoning map amendment and the subdivision application. And we appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Chris, did you have anything before?
No, just questions if there were.
All right, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Actually, we have one additional exhibit to be entered into. Ms. Richter was going to rewrite her comments to be entered as Exhibit 3 into the record.
Okay, now I'll close the public hearing.
Thank you.
That does not prevent, I think maybe you should sit for a second, because that doesn't prevent us from asking them questions.
That is true. My apologies.
Correct. Well, once you close the public hearing, typically that's the end of public, you can ask questions, but I'd recommend that you reopen the public hearing to continue the question and then close the public hearing once you're done with anybody other than the city commission and city staff.
Does anybody have questions of the applicant?
I suppose I have a simple question.
Then I'll reopen the public hearing.
Did the Planning Commission, I thought they addressed the issue of livability. Is that part of the comprehensive plan, or was that, does not apply?
I think Commissioner O'Donnell, they did address the issue of livability, but they did so in the context of Comprehensive Plan Goal 2.4, which, as we've said, requires balancing against other policies. And we also said in our appeal statement that just saying words like cohesiveness, compatibility, they don't mean anything unless you have some evidence to explain why those concepts, if they're applicable, aren't met. And that wasn't found in the record or in the Planning Commission's decision.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Okay, so now I'll close the public hearing.
Thank you.
And I'm going to try to take this a piece at a time, because I think we can reach a conclusion here. So I'd like to start with the schools argument first. And that is, I think it's fairly clear that the school district was noticed, had an opportunity to comment, chose not to, and therefore state law says that we can't use, that the Planning Commission couldn't use that as a criteria to deny the application. So are we all in agreement on that?
I'll defer to Mr. Kabizman.
I believe that state law is pretty clear on that.
Okay, so
and usually it's, I haven't ever seen an annexation or a subdivision where they haven't responded. Usually there is a school letter, and that's one of the things I looked at in here. It's where's the school letter? And it wasn't here. So, whether they forgot or didn't, whatever.
Well,
we can't use it, though.
I know that in my term on the school board, we got many, and generally speaking, either made no comment or commented in the affirmative because, that's how they get paid.
Correct.
By having bodies in the school.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're all good for denying that particular piece of the Planning Commission's decision. So move on to is it just the other two, transportation and sewer?
And then also the livability component.
Okay, so let's go on to transportation. So under transportation, both the applicant's traffic study and the city's review via John Replinger of that study and his own stuff supported the project. Is that right?
Correct.
So did anybody hear anything tonight that would change anybody's mind about whether the Planning Commission erred in using transportation as a subject for denial?
No.
Just a comment that I've heard from the good Mr. Robinson in the past, that unless you're a traffic engineer, those comments are meaningless from the general public. That if you appraised an intersection on a basis of the last 30 years, you can't get through it in less than 4 lights, and you used to get through it in 1. Unless you're a traffic engineer, those are meaningless. So I've heard nothing. Even if we had heard that, it wouldn't have been weighted the same as a traffic engineer.
Okay, well, and the problem we have is that what we feel like, you know, we can't really use to make a decision here, you know, just because I feel like, oh, there's going to be a lot of traffic here, we need to have evidence, and that's what we use.
So, yeah, and let me speak to that just for a second, because there are a lot of things that have happened in the past in Oregon City legislation that I don't like. But the last time I checked, I didn't get to go to Hogwarts and get a magic wand and be able to change things that I don't like. I have 4 other colleagues that sit up here with me. We have city staff. We look at things like the sign code and spend months and lots of public hearings and testimony to try to get to the best sense of what the community wants. And then that becomes law. It becomes our code. And we don't have the ability or the right to move the goalpost on somebody with the existing code that we have. So the only thing I can use to make a judgment on any of this stuff is what the code says or what the law says that we have in front of us. And so, again, on the transportation thing, all we have is the applicant's traffic study, the city's audit of that traffic study by our own contract traffic engineer, and no credible evidence that this is going to cause any. The fact is the subdivision at R10 would meet the traffic study, and the additional 4 lots doesn't change those numbers. Is that the gist of what I'm hearing?
Generally, yes, they'll both comply with the standards in the Oregon City Municipal Code.
So are we agreed that the transportation thing was misinterpreted by the Planning Commission?
Yes.
I'm trying to get us to a consensus here, so.
I think you can proceed without a comment from me. I'll
Okay.
continue to listen.
All right. So on to sewer infrastructure. I saw was there a letter from city staff?
There was.
Okay, and can you summarize that for us?
The Planning Commission finding was that the sanitary sewer was inadequate based on a lack of pump station details. The applicant identified that they're not doing a pump station, and that a pump station itself doesn't prove that there is a lack of capacity either. So the city's...
So the capacity question is more downstream than it is on the subdivision site itself.
Yes, and city staff did submit the memo that says they do not believe there is an issue with capacity.
And would you support that, Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Okay. So are we agreed that the Planning Commission once again erred in its judgment to say that sewer should be a reason for denial of this application?
I question the interpretation of capacity. Is capacity just final processing capacity, or the ability of the entire system to move waste to its final destination?
It's conveyance capacity. So downstream of this subdivision is the existing conveyance system has the capacity to move the sewer.
So
the answer is yes. The pump station was within the site itself, and it was identified in our master plan as that there may be a need for a pump station because of the elevation change. But in this case, the site grading is such that as proposed, that it could flow by gravity, according to the engineering.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay, so the last and probably most difficult question that we have to answer tonight is this whole issue of what, Mr. Wake?
Thank you. So the Planning Commission found a lack of compliance with a comprehensive plan policy about neighborhood livability and compatibility. And essentially what they're saying is, with this zone change, you can use this 20% lot averaging. And if you use the 20% lot averaging, you could put lots that are as small as 6,400 square feet, so ignoring what their actual subdivision layout is. You can put lots as small as 6,400 square feet next to the adjacent Hazel Grove subdivision. And then the Hazel Grove subdivision, all the lots that are adjacent are at least 10,000 square feet. So what the Planning Commission said is, because lot averaging is allowed outright, the zone change from R10 to R8 is not compatible with the adjacent lots, which are a minimum of 10,000 square feet.
And what conundrum does that pose for the city moving forward?
There are some, so they're the same comprehensive plan designation. So the comprehensive plan designates this, low density residential, and it has R6, 8, and 10. And so staff would be looking for policy direction from the City Commission about how to implement this comprehensive plan moving forward. Because our take from the comprehensive plan now is that they're the same designation, so they're inherently compatible, especially from R10 to R8. If we say that they're not compatible, then the question is, how would any zone change be compatible? And then also the other question of, on balance of all of the criteria for in the comprehensive plan, how are we weighting them? So we had heard testimony about the variety of other comprehensive plan designations for additional housing units and variety of housing, and how does that weigh with this livability criteria? So it leaves an unclear direction for staff on how to implement the comprehensive plan, and what do we do for future subdivisions or zone changes, whether they're residential or not. How would they ever be compatible? Because they'll always have an increase in some traffic, unless they're trip capped. So where do we go from there is the policy question. If R8 is not compatible with R10 and there's nothing in between.
And in our code, we're saying that all of that we assume compatibility between R10, R8, and R6 in the low density residential designation in the comprehensive plan.
In the comprehensive plan, the code does not say that.
Okay.
The comprehensive plan is what puts them together in the same comprehensive plan designation.
And isn't the comprehensive plan our guiding document?
It is. And
it's supposed to supersede the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance implements the goals of the comprehensive plan, correct?
That is correct.
And on the converse of that, then incompatibility would be something like multifamily, the R2, R4.
R5 through 3.5 to R2, yes.
Would you say that that's an incompatibility? Having multifamily next to the R10?
We'd have to look at it a case-by-case basis. We do have, have you heard the applicant say that there's a lot of zoning designations that are adjacent to other zoning designations that are not like one step away from them?
I think where you would see that is, let's say, along a corridor, and then you have residential, you have a mixed-use corridor or a commercial zone next to residential. I think that, that would be case by case. Is there mitigation? Are there setbacks? What are the building heights? What's the design? I mean, there's a lot of things that can go into meeting that policy, which is why you have more specific code below it.
So for instance, if we were to think about R6 and then you have an R5 zone?
We have an R5.
So if you had an existing neighborhood of R6 and somebody was asking for R5, would you necessarily consider that that would be incompatible with an R6?
We would say that the bar is higher because it's a different comprehensive plan designation, even though those numbers seem really close to each other.
Right. Okay.
But if you had an R10 and you want to put an industrial right next to it?
Or a fire station.
You know, so I mean, you know, the policy is meant to give some flexibility in the interpretation of what's being applied, realizing that you have the standards of the code that are more specific underlying it. I don't know if it'd be helpful. The goal in question here is neighborhood livability. Provide a sense of place and identity for residents and visitors by protecting and maintaining neighborhoods as the basic unit of community life in Oregon City, while implementing the goals and policies of the other sections of the comprehensive plan. So, you know, we're talking a lot about the livability part of that. You know, I guess the question is, you know, does this negatively impact the sense of place and identity for residents and visitors? And does it not protect or maintain neighborhoods as the basic unit of community life in Oregon City, while implementing the goals and policies of the other sections of the comp plan? So while it's identifying this policy, it's also saying, okay, you got to weigh that against the other goals and policies in the comprehensive plan that you have as well.
All right, I'm willing to hear comments from the commissioners on this particular item.
Well, I obviously think that it does impact livability. I think the commentary on that is actually by the Wheeler's own choice to put a buffer zone between their current lifestyle and the one that's about to be generated in front of them. I also feel that there's a big difference between having one lot abutting your lot and 3 lots. So I think the livability piece is a valid consideration, and I think it weighs heavily on me as a commissioner.
Commissioner Rainberg?
I think flexibility in our comprehensive plan is there for a reason. We live in a city that has a lot of topography issues. In this case, we have power lines and slopes, and it's difficult to develop sometimes. And so you can't automatically do cookie cutter lots that are 10,000 square feet and have it work. So I think rightly the people that developed the comprehensive plan allowed for that flexibility, and I think the applicant has proved that on balance, they're consistent in lot size when you add it all together with the surrounding subdivisions. And as they mentioned in the definition of place and identity, they're going above and beyond. They're contributing a park that connects, it was a tree farm that will remain partly trees, and so that connects to the past of the site. So I'm supportive of the application.
Tomorrow you guys will all be famous.
Commissioner Hyde?
I don't see a difference, enough difference between the proposed development and the current neighborhood when it comes to the phrase sense of place. I believe that the proposed development, the folks that would be living in the proposed development would feel that their community was a sense of place in the same way that the others would too. I mean, they're likely homeowners who have the right to live in the city, and it's a sense of place for them all. And I think that the livability is important.
Is that appropriate? Wow. Did you hear what she said to me?
No.
Sorry.
Yeah, let's.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Shaw.
Well, yes, it does get down to livability here, and it's, on the one hand, we're looking at, I think that a lot of our city is almost out to the urban growth boundary now. And the last thing I want to see us have to do is move that. And so that's why I'm always looking for some places to densify, but I worry about that because I'm not a real R6 fan because we have a lot of that going on in our city right now. So that's when I saw this was going to be R8, I said, that's not bad. That gives us a nice balance. So unfortunately, the applicant has followed the guidelines that he was given, I think.
I think that's true.
So I guess how can we say, we're sorry, that we don't feel that that's livability. I don't know. I'm still looking for input, guys, here. So.
Okay. Well,
You're gonna give it to me.
I'm gonna give the final word because, well, maybe not the final word, but I've been doing this a long time in many different capacities. I've served on the school board. I served on city commission before. I've been in a lot of places and a lot of different things, and making decisions like this are always the most difficult. And some people are always going to be unhappy at the end of a process like this. But just like the judge in the audience tonight, I don't have a choice but to follow the rules. That I can't let my personal feelings get in the way of making a decision that is obvious, because that's what the code is. That's what the comprehensive plan is. Whether I personally feel like, the 20% averaging is a good idea or a bad idea, that can't have any part of my decision making. I can only go by what the testimony is from both the applicant and the neighborhoods and city staff and the professionals that we use as consultants. And we take all that information and we have to weigh it based on what the rules are the day they made their application. We can't change the rules after that application is made. Just like, if you commit a traffic infraction, by the time you get to court, the fine for that traffic infraction can't have changed. So, it's the whole retroactivity thing going on. At the end of the day, I just don't see how the Planning Commission, other than based on emotion, could have reached this decision. The one thing I would like to make a condition, if we so choose to approve this appeal, is that the open space is it Tract A?
Tract A.
In Tract A be recorded as a public open space in perpetuity, to be maintained by the homeowners association.
As proposed by the applicant?
Yes.
If I could have one
Commissioner Shaw
comment too. Having been on Planning Commission a couple years, I understand the work they've gone through here. And they do all the heavy lifting for us. Very seldom do we get this in front of us because of the job they do.
Rarely, yes.
So I do want to commend the Planning Commission for their efforts here, that we don't take this lightly. This has been a struggle for me. So please consider that too, so.
Maybe a simple comment to the audience and the staff. I feel your pain. I can understand why you feel deceived. When an R10 becomes an R8, which is pretty tolerable, you folks have obviously indicated you're willing to do a step-down transitional area. But when is an R8 not an R8? When you apply the averaging rule. So I understand how you feel. And if we were to examine this, I would quit using the misnomer R8, or I would add another one, R8 as modified by lot averaging, so that people know the difference what we're talking about. So I feel your pain. I get it. Thanks.
Is there a motion?
I made the last one. Somebody else gets to.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Just to clarify, it would be a tentative decision, and we come back at a later date with your findings.
Copy that.
Move to tentatively approve PC 17-123, AP 17-05, appeal of the Planning Commission's denial of TP 17-03 and zone change 17-02 from R10 single-family dwelling to R8 single-family dwelling and subdivision of 77 lots in the Wheeler Farm located near White Lane and Orchard Grove Drive. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
And add amended condition of approval for
With a
public
condition of
open space.
approval as proposed by the applicant to make the lot
Tract A.
accessible to the public in perpetuity with maintenance by the homeowners association.
And the amended conditions of approval as discussed by the Planning Commission.
And the amended conditions of approval as discussed by the Planning Commission.
That's a mouthful. You can just say second.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Call a roll, please.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
No, respecting the input of the Planning Commission and the livability piece.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye.
It passes.
Okay, moving on. Under general business, we have second reading of ordinance 17-1012. Well, we'll just take a minute and let folks file out. To second reading of ordinance 17-1012, amending comprehensive plan, planning file PZ 17-01, zone change. Yeah, zone change, 17-04, minor site plan design review, allowing relocation of the Oregon City Community Development Offices. Ms. Turway?
I'm here to answer any questions that you have. This is for the second reading. We are the applicant, so.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve zone change 17-02, TP 17-03, Planning Commission finding, wait a second, is that the right one?
Oh, I think you got the wrong one.
I got the wrong one, sorry.
7A.
17-576, second reading of ordinance.
Sorry. I'll let somebody else do it.
Move to approve second reading of ordinance number 17-1012, amending the comprehensive plan, zone change, minor site plan, and design review, allowing the relocation of the Oregon City Community Development Offices.
Mr. Kvaisman.
Thank you. Ordinance number 17-1012, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City approving a minor site plan and design review, amending the comprehensive plan map in Title 17, zoning, Chapter 17.06.020, the official zoning map of Oregon City Municipal Code, by changing the designations of the following property: Clackamas County Map 3-2E-06DB, tax lots 2000, 2003, and 2008 from the MR Medium Density Residential Comprehensive Plan designation to QP Public Quasi-Public Comprehensive Plan designation. Clackamas County Map 3-2E-06DB, tax lots 2000, 2003, and 2008 from the R3.5 dwelling district zoning designation to the I institutional district zoning designation. Clackamas County Map 3-2E-06DB, tax lot 100 from the R10 single family dwelling district zoning designation to the I institutional district zoning designation.
Call the roll.
Oh, we need a second.
Oh, I thought we,
Don't we?
did we get a second?
I did not hear a second.
Second.
Okay, moved and second. Call roll.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye.
It passes.
Wish we could have a
Does anybody-
third reading.
Anybody want to pull anything off the consent agenda?
Oh, thanks.
Motion?
Move to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
One moment. Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye.
Passes.
Mr. Manager, keep it short.
Just a couple of quick updates with our first meeting falling on the 1st here. Just a reminder that we'll have a work session on the 7th, next Tuesday, and then a special urban renewal meeting on Thursday, the 9th, over at the library to have a discussion about the Cove. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. John Lewis for a couple of updates.
Just real quick, wanted to give a shout out to, I don't know how many of you were down at last night's event, but there was a gentleman that did a little project on the elevator shaft last night that I thought was kind of cool, and just wanted to share that with you. And Cyrus,
I didn't see that.
Cyrus Zamani was with the Party Factory. He's an independent guy. He's done some interesting things on that Elevate building as well. I don't know if you've noticed some of the messaging up there, but he uses this projected light. And he approached us asking if he could just try this. It was a situation where out of pocket, he bought the little art piece and he brought his equipment. He bought a permit and he put all the energy into putting this little projection up there on the elevator last night. So it was up there from basically 6 to 8.
I was gone before it was dark, so yeah.
I really thought I thought it worked out really well. It looks great in this picture here. So anyway, he's with the Party Factory, and he may be interested in trying some other things in the future too. So we'll look to him for that. The other thing I wanted to mention is some good news.
You teased us with that.
Yeah, I got 3 items for you, Brian.
How many slides?
Oh, yes.
Just 3 slides. That's it. So just wanted to just let you know that we got an award through the American Public Works Association for the 99E water line replacement project. And it was in the environmental category for a project that's less than $5 million. And I just really, the award wasn't just for us, it was for the contractor, which was Wildish, and it was for the engineer, which is Marie Smith. And then Dana Webb from our group really managed the project, and I thought she did an outstanding job. So just wanted to acknowledge that in a public way. And I would say the evaluation committee thought it was a pretty interesting project. So. And then just an update on the 10th Street median. So we've been pursuing the installation of a median for some time now. I know it's kind of been long in coming. We've got the equipment, or we've got the materials to put that in. We're basically going to put in a preformed plastic yellow curb, and on top of that locks in the standing candlestick cones, and they will be really along the centerline stripe in front of the, between Main Street and the railroad crossing. It'll help prevent left turns as you're coming up the hill into the driveway. We've already posted the signage, which makes it illegal to make a left turn, or for those that choose to try to go around the median, a U-turn, right? We don't want anybody making U-turns in that area as well. So
Why doesn't it reach all the way up to the edge of the track?
it actually will. This drawing is an old drawing that was from a transportation study that was done several years ago. It's the graphic that I had. We haven't really developed our own. We've got about 100 feet of it that we're going to put along there, which is going to stretch most of that way and get pretty close to the tracks. So,
because somebody would have to be a real idiot to try to do a U-turn on the tracks, right?
God, I have my Dutch brother.
Yeah.
What kind of odds do you want to put?
Yeah.
I would question if it doesn't need to be extended
John?
further toward Main Street.
That's it.
Because I don't want to give people the opportunity to briefly drive on the wrong side of the street to get to whatever vendor they look to get to.
About 100 feet.
Agreed. Again, this picture doesn't depict quite.
Okay.
We're going to expand most of that block with
Okay.
candlesticks and the curb. So just want you to know that that's going in Monday. It's really not going to take very long to put in, so we should be done in a day.
Is it temporary?
It's yes and no. I mean, it's made to be removed. For instance, we'd like to actually pave that stretch of 10th Street, and we're going to do that next year. So we'll pull it out and probably put it back, or we may pull it out and decide to put in something more permanent.
I
like a
only ask
concrete
because
curb.
that, the building that's going in right there, or proposed or whatever, the back side of the building is where the parking lot is, and for people to exit going left, are they?
That was always going to be right in, right out.
Yeah, you can't turn left.
They'll have the same.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so they
They'll
have to
the
go up
same
Singer Hill.
limitation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I suspect some people are going to love it. Some people aren't.
Love hate.
I'm sure we'll get some chit chat on Oregon City Chit Chat.
That's it.
You'll get an honorable mention.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's my fault. Everything's my fault. Anything else? Anything pressing, Commissioner Hyde?
Well, I had a little list.
Can you make it littler?
I will, yes, I will. But I've been really busy and doing some good things out there for the community, so I just want to report on it.
Okay.
The tourism strategic planning meeting has been going really great. There's 2 more meetings to go. And then the planning will be complete and it will finalize. So I just wanted to, I'll keep that short. The Downtown Oregon City Board meeting, we hired a volunteer and public relations staff person, Allison Brown. So we have a new staff down there. They're beginning their EID process, and the elevator is beginning a volunteer program to relieve staff for their breaks. And the Oregon City Rotary Club stepped up to help with that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Not on a regular basis, but on a temporary basis. And I attended the first Equitable Housing Advisory Team meeting. It was an introductory meeting. The purpose of it is to review barriers and incentives to create affordable housing choices in the city. We're meeting 5 times, and we'll conclude sometime next September with the report. And Renata and I attended the ribbon cutting for Fred Meyer's grand reopening. It was a very high energy morning there. Also attended the Clackamas County Affordable Housing Panel, heard from Homer Williams, if that name rings a bell, a developer who's tried to purchase Terminal 1 in Portland and wasn't successful, but it was a great all-around discussion with numerous elected officials in the county, and just excited to see where all this goes. Clackamas Cities Association dinner in Canby. Renata Mengelberg was the star. She gave a great presentation on the challenges of a public-private partnership as their new building is about to go up. And let's see, I attended a policy meeting at Clackamas County this week to hear their discussion on creating a housing leadership committee to recommend policies to the Board of County Commissioners related to the housing needs of the county. And we need to be aware of this because the suggested committee stakeholders are potentially going to include elected officials in various cities within the county. So we may likely be asked to participate on that. And that's it.
Mr. Shaw?
Went to the library 1-year anniversary, which was pretty cool. And then OCBA, they gave a presentation on what's going on with the hospital. And OC Together did their presentation Thursday night up at the high school on drugs in the schools. And then this morning, Mr. John Lewis and I attended a meeting on river assets that's going on. That's kind of studying all of our assets that goes from the bridge down the Willamette River and then Clackamas River also, and everything that's in there. So that's, I think there was 12 or so people in attendance for that, and that looks like it might be a worthwhile committee here. So that's it.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Attended some of the same meetings that Nancy mentioned. The Fred Meyer opening was amazing. So much, I would say, like several hundred Fred Meyer associates. They had 400 employees that worked there. It was pretty impressive. They're like one of our major employers, and you wouldn't think so, but anyway. Also attended the Willamette Falls Legacy Project Partnership Executive Committee to talk about ideas for moving the project forward with Mayor Holliday and Tony.
Okay, and so I attended that same executive session for Willamette Falls Legacy Project. I, in Oregon City, hosted and will continue to staff the inaugural meeting of the Clackamas County mayors and city managers and the board chair and county administrator. So we're going to meet on I think a bi-monthly basis to start with and see how that works out, but facilitate communication between the county and the cities and trying to get us to a more a collegial working relationship. In that vein, I met with Chair Bernard and Administrator Krupp and Tony and I on the first steps of moving the courthouse from location on Main Street to their new location on top of the hill. That's going to be probably a 4-year ordeal as far as that's going. So we want to make it as painless as possible for downtown. So we're examining ideas about how that process is going to move forward and how we can do the recruitment needed. So as those buildings empty out, we have tenants to put back in them, and what we're kind of looking at is what downtown's going to look like.
There's another meeting tomorrow at the county on
that's the public kickoff for that.
Okay.
Other than that, spent some time down on Main Street last night with the grandkid, walking around, saying hello to folks. And then she went out to Canby with her mom. So other than that, if there's anything to do to your, then we're adjourned.